The following is intended for mature audiences only. Discretion is advised.
Thank you so much for downloading this episode of So What Do You Really Do? The podcast where I, your host, Deadair Dennis Maler, talks to artists and entertainers about their day jobs. And the artist, who is not an entertainer, on this episode is illustrator, cartoonist, and artist Ellie Erhart. Ellie and I, all right, so this is a fun story. Ellie and I met at a Boston Hassle flea market. Boston Hassle is a very alternative local news outlet that also runs some alternative venue, like things like a flea market. They do shows. They do a lot of press. I met them through Dig Boston. My head editor, Chris Ferrone, had a relationship with them, with a working relationship with writers going back and forth. And I met them at Chris's, the people in charge of it, met them at last 4th of July barbecue at Chris's house. And so I go to occasionally their flea market, buy some goods. And I met an artist there who was doing live drawings of animals. Actually, I'm the only live animal. She does quick turnaround cartoons of your pet if you give her a picture. And she did a picture of Sister. My dog, who's named Sister, sat for her at the flea market for a good 10, 15 minutes as she drew her. Beautiful color picture, as you can see right here. And that was how I met her. Tagged her in social media posts, put her online. You can see it on my Instagram, the photo. And if you're listening only to this, you can go to my Instagram at Deadair Dennis and see the photo that she drew of her. If you're watching this on Big Comedy Network's YouTube, you see the picture right now. Here it is for you. For those just joining us, yes, by the way, this podcast is also a YouTube show. Go to Big Comedy Network on YouTube. And if you're a first-time listener, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it as much as I appreciate my longtime listeners and my short-term listeners and viewers and everyone who views the podcast, because every time somebody watches, listening, shares this, it helps the artist out. Anyway, speaking of the artist, Ellie and I met it there. We had a good time. She fell in love with my dog, who would not? I mean, Sister is the best. Okay. Fast forward a couple months later, Sister and I are doing our weekly Sunday routine, which is become a new routine for us that I quite enjoy, is on Sundays. Now, probably coming November, it'll be Mondays because my work schedule with Boston Ducktors will be changing for the final month of the season. What we do is on Sunday, we go to Harvard Square. I go to the bank and deposit cash because I get a bunch of cash tips now. Hi, this is a podcast about day jobs. I'm going to talk about my day job. All right. Anyway, and we usually have a nice little brunch. And of course, that also, most of those pictures make it onto my Instagram too. And we, sit in the park and we might go walk around, run a few errands, and we have our little day together. We come home. She gets more snacks and treats and ear scritches and belly rubs and snuggles. And then, I do the things that I need to do on Sundays. So on this particular Sunday, I saw a poster for MICE, the Massachusetts Independent Comic Expo over at BU, Boston University, which is right down the street from me. So I literally left my neighborhood where this MICE Expo comic book convention was happening to go to Harvard Square to see a sign that let me know that if I go back to my neighborhood, there's a comic book expo there. And so I decided to go because I love comics and art, and I wanted to see things, check it out. And so went back over to Boston University of my neighborhood and went to the expo. And as we're walking around, there's Ellie sitting there. I'm like, oh, hey, Ellie, look who it is. It's Sister. She's like, oh my God, it's Sister. And Sister's like, oh my God, somebody's going to pet me. And I was like, you know what? You're a hardworking artist. You should come on the podcast. And she did. And her day job is she's a graphic artist. She's an illustrator for comic books for children, which was fascinating to hear and talk to it. Thankfully, somebody actually works in the medium that they have their degree and their art is in. Like sometimes there's like a lot of crossover to like different genre of industries in this, in the guests that come on this podcast. But she's in it, in the world of graphic design when it comes to illustration. And we talk about children's book and we talk about her comics and the things that she's made and what inspired her to become an illustrator and a person who creates comics. especially very deep personal ones. I guess I have to say trigger warning. We're going to talk about some mental illness things. We're going to talk about gaslighting. We're going to talk about some bad relationship issues and stuff like that. So that's going to happen in this podcast. If that is a sensitive subject for you, I'm warning you now. Know that that's coming. I'm not saying don't listen to it. You do what is best for you and your mental health. If you can't listen to that stuff, all right, cool, fine. I'm not going to force you to do it. I'm not going to say that's not the way to go about it. But I say listen, empathize, and trying to sympathize also with my guest who had to go through a lot of these issues. And I'm a huge proponent for mental illness. No, wait, sorry. Rewind. Sorry. It'd be weird if this podcast was all about like everyone should have depression. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, I'm a huge proponent for mental illness and for the mental health of people and removing the stigma from mental health. Don't be ashamed to talk openly about your mental health if it will help you. Get help if you need help, right? There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing shameful about it. I talk about it all the time in my comedy. We talk more about some of the things that I say that I make jokes of to try and open up the conversation and normalize the conversation about having mental health issues and needing the help. So do what you need to do to get your help with mental health. But just know that we will talk lightly about some of those subjects that may be uncomfortable for other people. If that makes you uncomfortable, I'm sorry that it does. And I hope that you can get the wellness and the treatment that you need to get to be in a better place for you. So with all of that said, Ellie, absolutely interesting and fantastic. A young lady who is part of the LGBTQ spectrum or society. I don't know how you want to say it, but she's a comic book artist who is queer and also had to grow up in Texas. So there's some interesting subjects that might come up about her growing up and what inspired her to leave Texas to get into artistry and comics. And I'm really glad that she got to share her story with me. And by the way, first podcast for her, right? Oh, I love breaking people into the world of podcasts. Please enjoy my conversation with illustrator and comic book artist, Ellie Erhart. Because it doesn't work in Chrome. It works in Edge.
Oh, that's awful.
Or at least for me. I don't know. Right? It's the worst. When your product, when you literally says that our product works best in Chrome, I can't trust you as a company. Okay? So, I feel like, oh my God, like this computer has been like, every time I have a recording, there's some kind of issue with it. And I feel like it's always at the same, like whenever I'm trying to record a podcast. Yeah. Which is, by the way, like crazy. All the people who are like, oh, you know, I'm just going to come on this thing and have a podcast. Have no technical errors. Me, the professional, 30-year professional in the radio industry and the audio industry, is the only one that has problems on my podcast. It's insane. It's infuriating.
We have tech problems at work, even though we're like actual graphic designers. So, like, I've definitely had to basically hard restart my work computer multiple times.
Like when my audio recording program fails, it's like Photoshop for you failing. Like it's like you can't do anything.
Yeah, I've like had InDesign crash on me. It doesn't happen a lot, but it's happened and it's awful.
Oh yeah, and it's like I use you for one thing. That's it. Anyway, but God, welcome to the show. Which, by the way, I mean, I like doing this remotely now because it makes people feel more comfortable because they're at home and stuff like that. That's even though I still built this studio. Yeah, and scheduling is easy. You don't have to take the T anywhere. Yeah. Nobody has to go anywhere. It's a good process that I like. I've been so happy because of the pandemic because I can record with anyone anywhere and not have to worry about tech problems. Apparently, yeah. But well, let me ask you: how did you fare through the pandemic? Because when the pandemic hit, I was actually a freelancer.
You were what?
And I just got a job doing audio for like a law firm. Mm-hmm. And I was there for 3 months. I just got qualified for healthcare, and then the pandemic hit, and then I was trying to figure out how to give my or do my taxes and stuff with a freelancer salary. And I feel like you as an artist, most of the time graphic designers and artists are freelancers. When the pandemic hit in 2020, were you freelancing? Were you working for a company? Where were you at?
When the pandemic hit, I was in my last year of college and I was about to graduate. I was applying for internships in the publishing industry, and I was also applying for like entry-level jobs in the publishing industry. And then most of the applications that I sent out were canceled. They were like, "We're not hiring anymore. We're not hiring for." Yeah, so that was really awful. And then I ended up getting a remote internship with a publishing company here in Boston. Not the one I work for now, a different one. And
I love the sound of that remote internship. You're remotely working for college credit.
Yeah, except I graduated, so it wasn't for college credit. I did 2 remote internships after I graduated college.
What?
Yeah, I mean, the second one I did.
How do you remotely grab coffee for your bosses when you're a remote intern?
Oh, that's true. I never had to do that as an intern. I did a bunch of internships in college, and at no point did I get anyone coffee, which is nice.
It sounds like you actually had a good internship, unlike most other people's internships.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I had a really good experience there. That was at Barefoot Books, which is a children's publishing company. I think they just moved a little outside of Boston. When I was interning there, they were in Boston, and they were like, back then we still had hope the pandemic might only be like a couple months. So when they hired me, they were like, "Hey, if it ends, would you be down to come to Boston?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'd love to live in Boston for a summer." And then the pandemic just kept going, so it was remote the whole time.
Well, at the time, where were you? You were at school in Richmond, Virginia?
Yes, in Richmond, Virginia. Yeah.
When the pandemic hit, did you stay in Richmond or did you go to school remotely when you moved back to Texas?
Oh my God. Yeah. So the pandemic hit. I stayed. My parents are in Texas. The pandemic hit on my spring break. I was like, I have like a week maybe worth of clothes in like a duffel bag and my backpack. So I would not like to remain here in Texas with only these items and nothing else. And also I never liked living in Texas. So having to stay there with no notice, I wasn't about. So I was like, my dad was super nervous about the pandemic because he is an engineer. So he's very database. So he's like, we need to make like database the safest decisions. And I was like, okay, well, the virus has barely entered the US. I'm like gonna fly back to Richmond at the end of this week. Like, it'll be fine. So I was in Texas with my parents for spring break. I went back to college like normal, except no one else was there but me and like one other friend. Everyone else had like stayed at home. And then I did classes remotely from my otherwise very empty apartment because my roommate lived near DC, so she was a lot closer and could just grab her stuff. So she like did that and then went back with her parents. Then when I graduated, which was, they didn't even do like an online ceremony. They called it an online ceremony, but it was like a nice PowerPoint. I graduated via PowerPoint presentation. And then I moved.
Well, I mean, if there's a graphic designer who's going to graduate with something, why not make it, instead of walking on stage, an actual graphic presentation?
Honestly, that is so fair. I do feel like, I don't think they had a graphic designer do it though. Like 100% this was made like in Microsoft PowerPoint. But yeah, so that happened. And then unfortunately, I was like, well, everything else is closed down. It doesn't make sense for me to try and get an apartment. It doesn't make sense for me to move to Boston because this internship is totally remote. And so then I just like went back to Texas and it was really sad.
I can't imagine, like, where in Texas, just outside of Dallas?
Yeah, just outside of Dallas.
Which, by the way, I'm going to be I will be just outside of Dallas, October 22nd to 29th in Plano.
Oh, in Plano?
Doing the Plano Comedy Festival. Yeah, I'm really excited.
That is really cool. And that's also wild because my parents live in McKinney, which is like right by there.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be fun. I'm not excited to go to DFW.
Oh, yeah.
Because DFW, I've been to Allen and I've flown in and out of DFW before, and it is, oh boy, that airport, that is, like, when I went there, everyone, every TSA officer and security had the same name badge. They all said Officer Whitehead. And then they rushed us all through a metal detector that was clearly not even plugged in. It was a sham and insane. I got 3 knives past the DFW TSA.
Yeah. See, that is my that is the airport I've flown in and out of the most in my entire life, because that's where my parents live. Yeah, which is, at this point, I'm just used to it. But yeah, I feel like that's a good encapsulation of like the vibe Texas has a lot of the time. I'm also gay, so.
And the other thing, I liked walking down the highway and just seeing political signs on the side of the highway with just guys with guns going, "Oh my God, vote for me, I have a gun."
Yes,
like, that's basically the political
and it's like legitimately scary, and I would like my family to not live there, because I'm like, I feel like if you live somewhere other than there, you would have like it's actually safer, you know?
Well, I mean, now I'm from Baltimore. I live in Boston. I've lived in very liberal cities. I worked in DC. I'm familiar with Richmond a little bit because we had a sister radio station in DC, so we kind of dealt with them a little bit. Cool. But to me, Richmond, I mean, I even, did punk shows down there. Richmond, I would imagine like Richmond is that's the part of Virginia that's more close to the feeling of Texas, or no? I mean, what was your experience?
Okay, so
as someone who's clearly not a Texan, even though you were,
I appreciate you saying that, because I lived there for 18 years, but I feel like around the time I was like 10 or 11, I was really over it. But yeah, so my experience with Richmond was, I mean, I'd really only lived in Texas before that, so I loved it. I liked it a lot. Richmond is it is one of those cities that in a lot of ways, it's like a little blue bubble in a more conservative area.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of colleges there. That's why it's always like been a great hub for music, because there's always a lot of college kids wanting to go see bands and stuff.
I was about to say,
and it's kind of got an alternative culture, but it's still like,
oh my God, absolutely.
It's a weird alternative culture where it's like kind of necky, kind of rednecky, but still also kind of alternative.
Right. I was going to say, actually, like the closer you get to like where all the colleges are, it's like more progressive. But yeah, it's also very much an alternative culture. It's also very cheap compared to like Boston, which I think is great. I still go to Richmond a couple times a year to visit friends from college, and they'll sometimes they'll be like, "Oh wow, look at my new apartment." I'm like, "Wow, it's amazing. How much is your rent?" And I'm like, "That is 2/3 of what I pay." And I live in like a garden level, like that's why there's a pipe. I'm halfway under the earth.
Like a true artist, just buried away from the world in darkness.
Oh my, low-key, yes. Like, I recently went to a store, and it was like, if you spend this amount of money, you get a free tote bag. And I was making small talk at the register, and I'd spent like $3 under the amount of money where you get a free tote bag. And she was like, "I'm going to give a free tote bag to you anyway, because you're a starving artist, so your life is hard enough." And I was like, "Thank you."
Well, all right. Well, since we're talking about college, let's talk about why you got into that college. What was your inspiration? Like for me, I am in the radio business. I am in podcasting. I'm in entertainment because I started in community theater as a kid. I grew up in the heyday of the alternative rock movement
very cool.
of the late 80s and early 90s. Like we were discovering Seattle and all these bands that were like changing the face of music when I was getting, and the radio was the only place at the time you could do that. Yeah, MTV was around, but MTV was costly. The radio is free. Everyone, the radio was on everywhere. You go to a grocery store, you go in a car, you go in my kitchen. Radios were always playing, and radio combined everything I loved at the time as a teenager, which was comedy and music.
Yeah.
Like I feel like as a radio disc jockey, I could be funny and still talk about music, and that's why I got in that industry. I remember, and I've been lucky enough to not only meet, but also work with some of the heroes that I listen to every morning on my way to school, listening to the car radio, listening to the boombox radio as I get dressed. In the bathroom of my home I grew up in, we had, here we go. Here's 80s to a T. We had a combination AM, FM radio, corded telephone, toilet paper roll dispenser.
That's very 80s.
3 things all in one design.
That's beautiful.
Find anything that is a something, and then also a toilet paper dispenser. Why?
Right. I'm like, I love the fact that it's like, and also it gives you toilet paper.
Right? Like this thing was only designed for a bathroom. You're not putting this in the living room.
Yeah.
This is not your bedroom phone. This is going to be a phone that you're going to talk to people while you're on the crapper. It was perfectly designed for that. And every day I would listen to the radio in the bathroom getting ready for school. And I got to work with some of my heroes, and I've got to hang out and like just talk to my heroes that made me like Gina Crash, Alan Scott, Elliot, John Ballard. Like these guys are all DC radio area and Baltimore radio. And I've worked with, so I'm friends with people at 98 Rock, which still blows my mind, which is the heritage rock station where I grew up. Like I had WHFS and I had 98 Rock, and that made me the man that I am today, right? For better or for worse. And I've gotten to work, hang out, and be friends with those people. So for me, radio as a kid, looking back, it was a no-brainer.
That's very cool.
What made you want to grow up to become an artist? Because I even drew things as a kid, like thinking one day, I'm going to be a comic book artist, and that never took off.
Yeah, for me, it was like, I never wanted to do a job where you can like make money. Like, I always wanted to like go into something involving theater or something involving like writing or books or English or the visual arts in some way. There was for me like an actually very specific moment. I was like 13 years old, and I remember I was like looking at the cover of a book that I really liked on my parents' kitchen table. And I just had an epiphany where I was looking at the book cover and I was like, oh my God, someone made that. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And then I remember I also like, I waited a couple months before I told my parents, because I was like, I don't want to tell anyone this is what I want to do for the rest of my life in case I'm wrong. So I'm going to like wait a bit to make sure. Because I was 13, that was like several weeks. And then I was like, hey guys, this is what I want to do. And my parents were like, oh, that's nice. You might change your mind though. You're 13. And I was like, no, that's what's happening.
So what was the comic? What was the book that you saw that you're like, that is what I need to do?
It was Graceling by Kristen Kishore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't even know what it is, but
it was like a fantasy book that was popular at the time. She's a good author. She's still writing, I think.
So, okay. So was it a graphic novel or a regular?
It was not a graphic novel.
Because I grew up with comic books. I grew up, again, also heyday of grunge music, also the heyday of comic books too. Like that 90s resurgence with especially with like Todd McFarlane. And you know, everything that Marvel was doing. It was post Infinity Crisis, and then right at the beginning of the Unlimited comic series coming out with Marvel, and post Crisis with the DC and stuff. You know, Death of Superman. Like I literally held the actual Death of Superman.
Oh, that's
in my hand
wild.
with the black plastic and the red logo of blood. My brother and I opened it and we read it, and now 30 years later, I'm like, why did we ever open it?
I don't know. I feel like comics are like meant to be experienced, though. Like, you open it because that's what you're supposed to do with a comic.
Yeah, well, I grew up also in the post day where it's like comic books were now being deemed collector's items. So the comic book publishers knew that.
Oh,
so they
gotcha.
overprinted comics. So like comics from the 90s aren't worth anything anymore because there were so many of them. They're not rarities like they were in the Silver Age and the Golden Age of comics.
Yeah. Yeah, I also like always grew up with comics. Like I had my dad's old Archie comics. I had like the trade paperback editions of a lot of Garfield comics. I grew up like reading Calvin and Hobbes. Yeah, Calvin. I have like that behind me is like a Calvin and Hobbes print. But yeah, I think like there was a time period as a kid for sure where I remember I was like looking at comics and I was like, wow, it would be like so cool to, you know, do a newspaper comic that would like, you know, be an ongoing story and be like picked up by different newspapers. And then you would eventually just start doing that and more newspapers would pick it up. And eventually that would be how you make money. But the thing is, by the time I was growing up in the early 2000s, so that was kind of already dying out as like, as like a viable career. So I think by the time I was old enough to really think like in a serious way about what I wanted to do, that like wasn't a viable option. In college, I did an ongoing comic for my school newspaper for a couple years. And then I recently finished a webcomic I was writing with a friend. So I feel like those two projects kind of like scratched that itch to do like an ongoing story in like short bursts. For the webcomic, that's part of why I did it like 4 square panels and we just posted it on Instagram. And yeah, I feel like that for me, like, especially that webcomic, that was part of the, like, that fulfilled that desire to do something in that style, you know?
So yeah, so when I was going, it was all print, right? And you had to get somebody to be able to come. Hi, the professional radio DJ. By the way, I forgot to turn his phone off. I don't even know where it is in this mess. Okay. The studio camera looks great. It all looks beautiful. Everything from the outside of the camera view is an absolute mess. It's a nightmare. The amount of dog hair, which you know, of course, because you are an artist who drew my dog's sister.
Oh, yes, the dog.
The whole place is covered in so much of sister's hair right now. Her hair, she's shedding the worst she's ever shed right now. And it's everywhere. But,
yes.
So, as I was asking, so I grew up in the day of published comics. You were, I mean, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 25.
25, yeah. So, when you were 13, you were just seeing the beginning of the age of digital comics coming out in that world. And then you literally started your career in college and stuff like that right at the beginning, or right when digital comics, started taking off.
I was there witnessing that, because when I was like 13, probably even earlier, when I was like 11, 12, I started reading a lot of webcomics. And for me, I also definitely had like a deep desire to, like, someday I'm going to do that. Like, I'm going to make a webcomic. That was like me at age 12. So that was definitely also something that had a huge impact on me. And I feel like I did very much grow up in a world, though, where, like, as soon as I was old enough to, like, be someone who would notice and be interested in webcomics, like, they were there for me to read. So I'm probably, like, on the older end of people who grew up with webcomics just, like, always being a thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, was there, when you decided you wanted to grow up to become an artist, you know, was there art teachers at your school that were helping to nurture this, or were you on your own? Because I also grew up in a time where comic book artists were teaching kids how to draw comics. Yeah. Like, in the back pages of comics, there were certain shows around, like, and there was also, like, that infomercial where it's like, if you want to go to art school, try our art book.
That's so fun.
You know, draw this turtle, draw this pirate, and we'll tell you how good of an artist you are and how we'll teach you to be a better artist.
Oh, I didn't know that was
literally
a thing.
The publisher
so
house the publisher's clearinghouse of art scams. So what was it for you that was nurturing your idea of growing up to become an artist?
I mean, I feel like there is still, like, comic artists teaching kids to draw comics. That is still very much a thing. Like, I recently, this is the last time I saw you in person. I was tabling at Massachusetts Indie Comic Expo, and someone I worked with when I was at Barefoot, I believe she's still there, Lindsay Lay, she just recently published a graphic novel about, like, deep sea creatures, which is super cool. Ooh. Yeah, and she did like a talk workshop thing at Mice that was teaching kids how to draw comics.
Oh, I mean, there's so much tutorial on teaching out there now with all the internet, YouTube, and TikToks, and there is. So it's, the teaching world is out there, and it's more prominent now than it ever was.
Like, it's very much still a thing. Also, like, graphic novels for kids, kind of, that's, like, as someone who works in publishing and as someone who makes comics, that's super exciting, because graphic novels for kids as a genre is, like, super, super new, and it's growing really fast. So I feel like there's, like, a renewed interest that kids have in comics that maybe wasn't there when I was growing up, just because there was a lot less out there. But for me, there's also the fact that I was growing up in Texas, and, like, you know, in Texas, there are fewer people around who are, like, publishing as an industry is located super coastally, or, like, very much in big, very expensive cities. And so Texas, growing up, I didn't know anyone who worked in publishing, even though I was like, that is what I want to do in some capacity. It wasn't until college that I decided that full-time I wanted to do book design, like, in-house for a publishing company. But even when I was, like, 13, I knew I wanted to, like, be an illustrator, and there was no one in, like, the art, involved directly in the art scene in my hometown that I was aware of who was really like that. And so, like, in Texas, the art things for kids weren't like, you can go to this and someone will teach you how to draw a comic, because no one was there like that. It was all like fine arts. So that's basically what I did. I took art classes at school, obviously. They were, it was Texas. They were not the priority, I would say. Like, I remember for like AP advanced placement, like AP art, you send in a few physical pieces of your portfolio, and they're supposed to be like mounted on like matte paper. I remember one year our teacher had us like cut out squares of like cardboard to put them on and just like tape them to the cardboard, like, from boxes, that kind of cardboard. Yeah. So that was that. And then I was
ghetto mounting is like an Amazon Prime box with your art.
That was like literally like you'd like cut out a rectangle that was like the size of like your paper, and then you would like tape your paper to it, and you'd be like, all right, let's mail it. That was what was happening there. So
Elmer's gluing refrigerator boxes just.
Yeah. So then after school, though, I got involved with like a local arts organization called the McKinney Arts and Music Guild. And I did basically like fine arts, like painting classes a few days a week after school. And that was actually the first time I started, like, my part-time job in high school, especially towards the end of high school, actually kind of became selling art through opportunities I found through that. Like, I would like do live painting at events, or like I would like basically table at art events through the Arts and Music Guild, and I would have like little tiny paintings to sell, and then I'd like also find, I like found people who like wanted to commission me for larger paintings, that kind of thing. So I had that experience starting from probably about age 15 on.
Oh, that's great that you actually had that ability to be able to find a community like that. I mean, God bless the internet for being able to find these communities and stuff, but being in a small town where you're trying to find something about the world of entertainment and you have nothing around you. Like, the reason I became a tech guy in the entertainment industry is because I grew up in small theaters, so everyone had to do everything, but also more importantly, because no one else could or wanted to do the things that I wanted to go do. I had to figure out how to do the tech part of it. If I wanted to be a radio disc jockey, I had to figure out how microphones and recorders work.
Yeah, that was exactly what it was like for me, because like I was doing fine art in high school because that's like the art scene that was available to me, but that was never what I wanted to do. Like, I wanted to make comics. I wanted to be an illustrator. I didn't really discover graphic design until college, but I do very much, I like doing that. Like, I like making art that's like, the way I think of it is like, I like making art that's like designed to be understandable and communicate with people.
Now, why did you choose the Virginia Commonwealth University to be the art school that you want to go to? Why did not go to something I got to imagine there's an art school in Austin, which is close to you. There's other schools around. Like, what made you narrow? Now, granted, I know the answer is going to be because they accepted me, but what made you want to apply to them?
No, there are multiple reasons. That's actually a really good question. One thing is Texas, like Texas actually, at least when I was applying to college, as far as I was aware, there were no schools that offered an illustration degree or really anything similar in the entire state, which is, I think I feel like that like emphasizes how much it was like, as a kid, I did not have access to anyone who was doing the kind of thing that I really wanted to do, which makes sense because it's like, oh, well, they all had to, probably a lot of them grew up in Texas, but they all had to move away to go study illustration.
I mean, the reason I moved away from Baltimore is because being a comedian working in radio in Baltimore, the best I could hope for is that it would be the biggest comedian in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. And that and 270 gets me on the train. Yeah. So I came to a bigger city to do comedy and moved higher up in the markets. And my history is my history, but that's a whole nother story and a terrible can of worms.
Yeah. I mean, there are like, I know because I work at a publishing company that like, we have worked with illustrators who live in Texas. Like, Texas is a big state, but also somehow if you want to study illustration specifically at a college, you can't do it there. And so when I was 18, I was like, my parents were like, oh, you should try going to UT Austin. They have a good art school, because they really do. But, I toured and I was like, this is all fine arts, which is not what I want to do. So I actually didn't apply.
So what's excellent for a moment? Explain for everyone and me, dum. What's the difference between like learning illustration and learning fine arts?
Okay, so learning fine arts, like say if you do a painting program or a sculpture program, that is, you're making the kind of stuff that's going to go in a gallery or in a museum or something like that.
Okay.
That is the easiest way to explain it. It's very conceptual, and the end goal is to, like, if someone listening is a fine artist, like, I'm sorry because I'm not a fine artist, but I feel like the end goal, I think, is often to, like, serve the concept in terms of making an interesting piece of art that explores the thing you want it to explore, right? Versus with illustration, comics, that's like what I actually majored in was named communication arts, and that's because the priority is on making something that communicates a specific thing to the viewer. And the kind of stuff I do, like, I really like narratives, so the kind of art I make is about communicating a specific narrative well and effectively. So all the choices you make are, like, in service of communicating that story as well as possible. Like, if, say, you look at, like, an abstract painting, and you look at it, and it intrigues you, and it makes you feel something, but you're not sure quite what it's trying to say, that painting, that's not a bad painting. It's probably, like, a great, amazing painting, right? But if, you're looking at a comic, and you're like, I can't follow the panels, I can't tell what's like happening on this page and what it's trying to tell me, most of the time, that means that it didn't successfully communicate. Although obviously there are exceptions for comics where it's like, like in movies where they purposefully, like, make things confusing or ambiguous. But like,
yeah, I know that. Yeah, I was never great at abstract. Like, I made a YouTube channel that I watch called Film Riot. Or no, it was Indie Mogul. Yeah. Indie Mogul, they do a lot of, like, behind the scenes DIY movie stuff, and they would have a contest every Halloween to make a spooky movie, a short film, and they had different subjects of this. That one year was I made an Edgar Allan Poe style short of The Telltale Heart, and my brother, who went to film school, dropped out of film school, went. I made this little few minute thing about The Telltale Heart. I had friends help me shoot it and act in it, and it's garbage. You could find it online. It's out there. But this Telltale Heart thing was so bad. I made a beating heart from, like, tissue paper and latex, liquid latex, and it had hoses and like turkey basters, and it was black and white, and it's so bad. And I showed it to my brother who went to film school, and he looked and was like, I mean, my only notes is it's too literal. You should be more abstract about what you're doing. I was like, okay, I don't know what abstract is. And he goes, yeah, well, that's clearly because you didn't do any of that.
That's very funny. Yeah.
So when you went why did you settle on that one? Was there other schools that you were looking at besides VCU?
The first school I applied to, and how I was able to get out of applying to any schools in Texas, because I wanted to go to college that fall after I graduated. And also, my parents, like, they had a college fund for me, for which I feel really, really fortunate. But my parents were not and are not the level of super rich where they could just pay for, like, an out-of-state school. So I got out of applying to any schools in Texas because I applied to KU, Kansas University, like early action, and they do, or maybe it wasn't early action, whatever. It was really early. They do rolling acceptances. I applied to it the summer before senior year, and they do, like, automatic tiered scholarships. Like, if you have a certain minimum GPA, you automatically get this amount of money. So I was like, okay, if I apply, like, they will probably give me enough money to where I could just go there. And if I get in, I mean, that could be, like, my backup school instead of a school in Texas. So I did that, and that was, like, the closest to home school I applied to. It was, like, over a state away. I wanted to leave Texas very badly. But,
I mean, that was my difference was I didn't want to leave Maryland. I didn't want to leave Baltimore.
That's where I've been to Baltimore.
And I'm glad I did. I went to a school just outside of Washington, D.C. So I lived in Baltimore, and I would commute to D.C., which is, like, since you're in Boston, it's like 45 minutes away. It's like, actually, I used to compare Boston to Providence. DC and Baltimore are closer together than Boston and Providence.
Oh yeah,
are.
absolutely. Like right
it'd be
there.
like if you drove to Brockton every day.
Yeah.
For school, but it was also a major city.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that also like when I'd always lived in the suburbs my whole life. I knew that I hated the suburbs. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew that I hated the suburbs. And so that was definitely part of it with VCU. The school was like in the middle of a city, and that was nice. But yeah, so I applied to a good handful of schools. I applied to 6, which I think is pretty normal for a college senior. VCU, there were a few major factors. One was that, like KU, and like Mass Art too, actually, I almost went to school up here. VCU gave me a large enough scholarship that it brought it down to what it would cost for like an in-state public school in Texas. Yeah, okay. So that was a major one. Like I wanted to be able to afford school. And then also VCU is actually it's like one of the top 5 art schools in the country, like their art school is. Yeah,
oh, really?
Yeah, it is. It's no one outside of VCU knows that, even though I think I'm pretty sure when I was attending, the ranking had us at number 2, behind Yale.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you had a great education. What was the schooling there like? Was it different disciplines? Was it, you're doing narrative stuff.
Yeah.
Did you literally have to sit and learn to write stories? Because
you didn't have to.
It's amazing how many people don't know how to tell a story. As a comedian who is a storyteller, the amount of people that don't understand a story is a beginning, a middle, and an end. And something has to go through some kind of progressive change from start to end. So many people tell anecdotes that go nowhere, and they're like, I'm a storyteller. I'm like, no, you're boring.
That is one nice thing about the fact that a lot of my friends are also artist storytelling people, for sure. I do not have to deal with that frequently. But so creative writing was actually separate from the VCU School of the Arts, which I think is technically, VCU Arts. That's what, the art school there is called. Creative writing is actually separate from that, but all the visual arts have to go through a foundation program, an art foundation year, which if you go to a serious art school, art college, you have to do that. And basically how it works is you spend your freshman year taking classes in a huge variety of different kinds of visual art, and you get experience with everything. And at most serious art schools, it's a weed out year, basically. And you don't get a lot of sleep, and it's really stressful. And so that was my freshman year, except I don't think VCU does this anymore. But what they did and had done for a long time, when I attended, was when you got accepted as an 18-year-old, coming out of high school or whenever you decide to go to this college, you got in to the art school, but you didn't get into any specific major. So basically you were getting into the art foundation program. And what you had to do is you would do that for 1 year. You would do the 2 semesters, and about part of the way through your second semester at the, specifically in the spring, you, apply with your work from the foundation program to the specific major that you want to get into. And you put your top 3 choices. And I think it's if you have a passing GPA, they guarantee that you will be in that you will be in a major, but they do not even guarantee it's going to be one of your top 3, right? What? Yeah, no, it was
So you go to college with an expectation to learn something, graduate with it, and they go, no.
Yeah. No, it was really stressful because I was, part of why I was there is because I was on this scholarship, and it's a 4-year scholarship. So you can't take the classes for most of the art majors that you need to take to graduate with that specific major unless you've been accepted into that major, or you couldn't. Like I said, I don't think they do the applying thing anymore. That changed in the last few years. But yeah, so
yeah, it sounds almost like hazing your students. Hazing's pretty illegal in most states when it comes to
it's very intense.
Fraternities and stuff. But it sounds like the school is built on hazing art students.
Physically, in terms of the definition of hazing, no. Psychologically, kind of, yes. It was stressful. I was if I don't, get into communication arts, I either need to transfer colleges, do a different major, or, you know, somehow figure out how to do like 3 years of classes in like 2 years because I can't afford to take more time in college. You know?
Ah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was so stressful. I remember I have anxiety and depression, like chemically. So that spring, I was also seeing a therapist through my school's like counseling office, and I was telling her about this situation, and she was like, "Yeah, we've had a lot of VCU Arts freshmen coming in this week. It's not good." And I was like, "Thank you."
Hey, you know what? We get the amount of students we're having to help mentally is spiking. Maybe there's a correlation to the programs.
Yeah, I think that might be part of why they like stopped doing the applying thing. You know, like they're doing what I think the majority of art schools do, which is you do the foundation year, and once you complete the foundation year, you just go into your major, which is better. But yeah, so I did thankfully get into communication arts. And once I got into communication arts, I started really, really loving the classes. And it was a lot nicer. I did overall. Like, I had a good time in college. Like, I really liked going to VCU Arts. I would recommend it to anybody. It is also a public school, so even if you, like, don't get a scholarship, it is still cheaper than most art schools.
So, what was the plan before the pandemic hit? What was the plan after graduation? Because I did my 6 years of community college and didn't graduate. But my out was while I was still in college, I got a job at a radio station. One of my professors, she was in communication with an ops manager at a station. Every so often he would hit her up and say, "Hey, send me some of your students." And I'm one of the only students she would send.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because I was excelling in the classes. I had a passion for it. I had an aptitude for it. And she was like, "You'll be great at this job." For better, for worse, whatever it was, you know, I worked for a right-wing political talk station.
Oh, wait, you do?
That was also a sports talk station. That was also a CNN repeater. So I worked for a cluster of 3 stations.
Oh, wow.
That was Glenn Beck, CNN, just 24/7. And then we also did sports.
Wow.
And it was, it was a great way to just get the idea of that this is a job and that I have to not learn to love the content, but learn to love doing the job despite the content. So, and I learned that in college because the college radio station I had was an internet radio station where I was doing my work at. And we had a format. We had a playlist that we had to stick to. Most college radio stations are like fun little things. Yeah. We're off the grid, and you know, we're non-commercial. We'll play whatever we want. Not at the station I was at. We had an adult contemporary format. We were basically, you know, adult pop station, like a mixed station. We had a format we had to stick to. Now, granted, I got my own like local music show that I did on Wednesday nights at 9:00, where I could bring bands on, and that's where, you know, really dove into the band industry stuff. And so I got the ability to do that, and I got to play my own program, but I still also had to abide by FCC policies, even though we weren't an FCC station. We weren't over the air. We were internet. But because my teacher was teaching us, this is the format of the station, I had to stick to those standards. So I had to take my friend's CDs in the late 90s, early 2000s and figure out how to censor them and blank out cursing so I could play them. Now, granted, if I let cursing go over the air, nothing was going to happen legally. But if my professor heard it, he'd be like, "All right, I'm going to take your show away because you're not standing to," you know, so I had a lot of pressure to do that. Well, I used to joke all the time that he would call the studio and I would do something, I'd stumble over a thing or make a off-color joke or whatever, and he would call the station and fire me, and I would make jokes that I got fired from this radio station every week for something or other. But that was kind of the reality that I lived in. Of course, I got a lot of leniency because my professor liked me because he knew I was very adept at this, and you know, I was a student teacher helping the other students and stuff. And I had a passion for it. It wasn't just somebody who was taking a course. And like, out of all the people I went to school with, 4 of us maybe work in radio, and one of them never even worked on air. She's a sales rep. So it's like,
that's how it is sometimes.
Nobody really followed through on the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how.
So yeah, my path was while I was my last 2-3 semesters, I was already working in a radio station. I was going through the motions at class because I already knew I had a job. I'm learning things. I'm going from like just a regular board op, which means nothing to nobody, but low level position, to I went immediately into a very high level engineering position.
Cool.
And then I started working on air and stuff like that. So when I left college, it was like, peace out, dudes.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need this to finish the school. I've already got my job. And
Yeah, that is so nice.
that 20-year history, that 15-year history, a whole another can of worms. We're going to keep saying can of worms on this. In fact, you're going to make an illustration of somebody's life that's called can of worms, I'm sure, now that we've had this experience. But for me, I knew my path. What was your path? Let's forget about the pandemic and how it ruined everything. But what was your expected path at the end of college?
In college, I did a whole bunch of internships, kind of starting my junior year, because sophomore year, I worked as an RA, which was a really good experience, but it was also a really hard experience. That was it's a lot of work, and it's not like, and I was like, it doesn't make sense to do another year of this. Like, I'll never have time to do an internship if I work as an RA again, and I want to do that. So starting junior year, I did a whole bunch of internships. At first, I was thinking that I wanted to be a children's book illustrator, like full-time, and try to do that. And so I interned in the children's art studio of the Richmond Children's Museum, which was a great experience. I interned at a printmaking studio, which was fun. And I learned kind of near the end of my sophomore year, near the end of my junior year, I did learn that book design for publishing companies was a thing that one could do as a full-time job. Designing book covers, setting what the typography and the interior of books is like. And I did think, I was like, well, I want to make children's books, and this is another way to make children's books is also artistic. It's also doing art. I'm interested in this. And so, sort of as, I was doing these internships, eventually I was like, I'm interested in book design. I should see if I can get a graphic design internship. And then I did. And then I got another one after that. And I think another one after that. And that was really cool. And I was like, oh, I like doing graphic design, just sitting and making something look cool. This is actually really nice. I used to not be, because I came from such a fine arts background, I feel like it took me a long time to get comfortable with digital art, but then once I did, and once I got used to the tools, I was like, oh, this is kind of awesome. So sort of by around the end of my junior year, I was really about super divided between if I wanted to immediately after college try to go into book design or try to do freelance illustration work. And also, notably, one of these is a freelance job and one of these is a full-time salaried situation. Both are extremely competitive, so there was no option here that was easy. But yeah, that wasn't something I considered.
I mean, that's what this podcast is all about. Figuring out what we have to do during the day to support what we want to do at night. Having to figure out what's the job that's going to make me pay my rent and let me give the creative outlet that I need, and let me be able to create the things that I want to create outside
exactly.
Because trust me, I've had so many jobs where I'm drained mentally and I can't go create.
Yeah,
and then I've had jobs that inspire me. And not only do I go create and have fun and be energetic, then it inspires me to create more things afterwards.
Right
now. I'm doing between 3 and 5 80-minute comedy shows a day at Boston Duck Tours, driving around the city. Right, doing these shows, and it is so draining energy-wise, but it's inspiring me to write more material, to keep going out there. I'm too drained to go out and do it, but I'm waiting for that to all the creative energy that I've been building up over this season. With little spurts of creativity here and there with my audiences and the thing. Yeah. Waiting for the end of tourist season where I can just explode and get right back into on stage. And next week I guess it's next week, the 22nd. That's next Sunday. I'm going to, now everyone knows when we recorded this.
Yeah.
I can't wait to go for an entire week, have no job, no worries, no concerns, and just go do comedy for a whole week again. I mean, I had that experience back in February when I was in LA for the week, or 10 days when I was out there skirting out of my old job into the new job. And man, it's just so invigorating to think about where I have nothing to do but focus on comedy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's going to be great.
Yeah.
So you got into graphic design, in specifically for children's books or for books in general. Was there ever, because graphic design is a very wide field. There's plenty of people who do graphic design and don't know how to actually draw. Their graphic design is just making street signs and lettering and stuff like that. Was that also something that you were looking into, or were you specifically trying to find illustration to stay in that? Because hey, look, I've worked at Best Buy, I've worked at Home Depot, I've worked in so many jobs to support doing comedy and acting and podcasting and all this, that you just got to do what you got to do sometimes.
Yeah. So what I sort of landed on, because with visual arts, it's like all about your portfolio, right? Getting hired. And it's like, I cannot make the best illustration portfolio I can make and also the best book design portfolio I can make at the same time. So I did this program the summer after my junior year called Illustration Academy, which is just like basically like a series of like week-long illustration like master classes from people in the industry. And I did a couple weeks of that. And it was a really good experience, but it also made me realize that I do not think I want to freelance full time, you know?
Oh, it's the worst. When I was a freelance audio editor and recordist, like,
I have friends who do it.
Bless the hearts of the people that can get regular work and they can just work consistently doing freelance stuff. I had some of the worst time trying to find work. And then when I found the work, the hardest part is just hunting people down. And I'm pretty aggressive and I'm okay with it, but it's just so stressful when you got to be sending emails to somebody like, hey, your invoice is due, please pay. And then you're like worried about the money coming in and you're trying to figure out your bills, and like you have feast or famine, you have all the work and then 2 months and all the pay. And in between you're like working, but not making any money.
Like a lot of people talked about their experiences working as freelance illustrators. And I feel like there are people who can thrive in that environment. Like I know 2 separate people who went to art school the same year as me, both of whom I had a ton of classes with, who are now both like working in freelance, like doing freelance illustration full time, and they're both doing great. So like, I think some people can legitimately thrive doing that, but I'm like, I need the routine and the like steadiness of knowing kind of what's happening every month, at least to some degree, money wise. And I want to not have to think about it, you know? So I decided, it's like after learning from all these amazing artists and also hearing them talk about what it was like working as a freelance illustrator, I was like, okay, so I think I don't want to do that. Although I still want to do illustration. The plan kind of became, which this is what I ended up doing and what I'm doing now, is that I will focus on getting a job as a book designer in publishing, preferably in children's publishing, which is thankfully where I ended up. And then once I've done that, I will focus on like freelance illustration career stuff. But like, we got to prioritize one thing at a time. So the hope was that I would get an internship at one point at a publishing company and then get hired at a publishing company full time. Or, you know, even say I did a lot of graphic designing internships. Like I did 3 separate ones my senior year of college. Like, like the end of senior year, I had, how many? I had like, I think technically 3 jobs my senior year, the end of my senior year of college, because I was doing an internship, and then I was also doing a paid internship with my school's like social media team, making graphics for social media, which I loved. It was so fun. Everyone there was really cool and was super encouraging. Great experience. And I was also doing another internship in graphic design for the Richmond Children's Museum, which was also great. Like, I liked working there enough that I like came back. I was like, hey, I want to do graphic design now. Can you hire me for another internship? And they were like, sure. And it was good. then then my third job was just like working for student affairs, sitting behind a desk, which was, it's the kind of job you have in college. So yeah, so that's what was happening. And I was like, maybe after this, like I've busted my ass doing all these internships and stuff. So perhaps I could even like just get hired at a job. But if I need to do more internships in publishing first or whatever, that's fine. I'll also apply. Because at this point I was like developing a decent, just straight up graphic design portfolio. Like, it's not on my website anymore, but because of the internships I'd done, I had I had examples of like marketing design and social media graphics. So it was like, oh, like find something like that. And then eventually I will try to end up working in publishing, which is where what I want to be doing from 9 to 5. And then of course it never works that way. So like I did a remote internship in the fall after my senior year. I'd applied for a bunch of internships. I'd applied for a bunch of jobs. I didn't get any of them, and I didn't have anything to do. And this is the job that I have done that is the most just doing what we have to do to survive. Because I ended up working like it wasn't a random school. Like it was a school that like I knew people who, I don't want to be like, I went to work at a random school in my hometown. It was not random, but to me, in the context of my like career path, it was a relatively random thing for me to do. I worked as like a full-time special ed aide at an elementary school for like most of a semester.
Which, by the way, I just have to point out, I know it's the correct term, but it sounds like we're not supposed to be saying special education anymore. Like, it's like in the world that we are, I feel like that's more taboo than some of the other things that we say. So anytime somebody who's worked in the industry and goes, oh, I was a special ed teacher, I'm like, are we allowed to say that? Like, am I supposed to look over my shoulders before I say special ed now?
Yeah, it's because it's like the one acceptable place to say it is like people will use special ed as an insult, but it's like actually like just the name of that department of the school, So it's like the people who can say special ed are the people who are like actually like that is the department that they work in. Like that's their industry. So yeah, I was a special education aide and I worked with just a few kids ages like 5 to 8, and I really loved the kids, but it was that is an example of like a job you were talking about that is so draining, because when you're working with little kids, you have to be on like all day, like they're
tell me about it. I've been lucky. I've been talking about the past couple of weeks. I've been so lucky that at Boston Duck Tours, I've had amazingly great kids. I've had no troublemakers. I've had nobody like at worst, they're just apathetic. And even that, they're not. Like so many kids have been like engaged while I'm going on and on about history and using 80s music references as punchlines where they weren't even like their parents weren't even around in the 80s music for some of the references that I make. And they're just like, they're listening and they're engaging and they're talking. I'm still reeling over this. I had a review of feedback from a parent that was like, hey, I have a high functioning autistic kid. And the fact that UK Lee, which is the name of my character that I do tours under, because I'm a ukulele playing punk rock.
Oh, that's so fun.
And they're like, the fact that my kid, who is high functioning autistic, was able to drive the boat, trusted him as much, it means worlds to me. And I'm like, literally reading that as I'm riding the train on the subway into the work and just starting to tear up in front of people on the red line. And I'm like, all right, you got to get your shit together, Dennis. This is nice. But you're a 42-year-old man crying a bunch of college students.
Yeah, honestly,
get it together.
That is one thing that's really rewarding. Like when you because kids don't, especially little kids, like they don't like bullshit you to save your feelings. Like when a kid likes you or like something you did and is paying attention to you, like know that they really mean it. So like I love kids. Working with them full time takes a lot of energy, and I feel like part of it is like I know I'm very outgoing and multiple people in my life like insist that I'm an extrovert, but I'm not. Like that's a lot of peopling. When you work with little kids, you are peopling all day. Yeah, so I did that for 6 months, and then this was also during the pandemic, so I was like living at my parents' house in my hometown, And I was like walking to the school that I worked at every day and like walking back home. And then like, you know, like the clouds parting and a beacon of light shining down, I got an internship at Macmillan, which was great because, you know, like I was specifically with Farrar, Straus and Giroux, which is their literary fiction imprint, which is very cool because they make awesome books. And I ended up with the marketing department doing like both marketing work, but then also some graphic design work for them. And that was really exciting and a really cool opportunity. And it's actually funny to me that you were like, oh, wow, you had internships like outside of college, because everyone who was at Farrar, Straus and Giroux that spring semester had graduated college. Like, I think part of it is just their internship program is competitive. I think but there were people who interned with Macmillan who were like younger and in college, but
I mean, I know there's a lot of companies and a lot of industries that do post-college internships.
They did pay me.
And I honestly think they should change the names of those. Those are not internships. Like, they're almost endangered servitudes. They're almost like some of them pay now because legally a lot of them have to pay. You can't do like college credit. Like, those internships are very much different than like learning at college.
Oh, yeah,
like,
absolutely.
If you're doing an internship at a law firm, but you've already graduated, like, you're an employee.
Yeah,
like,
you're like a...
So I think, I mean, personally, as someone who's not really, like, I had a couple interns in the radio industry. They were doing college credit, and we basically just were teaching them how to be radio people while doing, like, some of the grunt work for me. But, yeah, I don't know. I think the whole internship thing is...
Yeah, it is a...
Needs to be overhauled,
yeah,
but that's a whole nother conversation to have somebody else.
Oh, my God, like, I mean... I had a great experience at all of my internships. I'm glad that more and more internships are paying now. Macmillan was actually the first paid internship I ever had. And it was pretty great. It was like more money than I made at any job ever because it was remote, but they were paying me like, you know, New York hourly wages. And I was in Texas. Yeah.
Nice.
I was in Texas. So I was fully like at the job at the school. I had fully been making like $10 an hour or something like that.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the cost of living in Texas is also, like, way cheaper.
But it's also, I mean, they also just, like, passed the law where you don't have to give people water breaks anymore.
Oh,
so it's
God,
like...
did they?
It's a cost... Like, they're doing everything they can to try and bring down not just the cost of living, but bring down living in general in Texas. No shade, but it's also like, yeah, I'm going to throw some shade on y'all, Texas.
No, but 100% shade to Texas. My mom is actually a high school English teacher in Texas. And, like, because I work in publishing and she knew I would be interested, she told me about all the, like, you know, all the different books that are being banned, not just from the school library, but the teachers have to remove them from their personal libraries. Like, their personal classroom libraries, which, you know, if you know anything about teachers, then you know that, like, those are mostly paid for with the teacher's own personal money. Yeah. So, yeah, Texas is... It's gotten worse. I do kind of...
Texas is gonna Texas.
I almost feel like a little I told you so about it because I feel like, which is irrational, but like, you know, I feel like when I was 11 years old, I was super over Texas and it like wasn't doing any of this yet. So like on some weird level, I feel like I called it, even though that's like not what happened. But yeah, then...
Yeah, and honestly, like I know you and we're catching a lot, like I'm sure people are learning exactly who you are, but I'm not like, not to tell your business, but it's like you're an artistic, sensitive person who's on the LGBTQ plus A2 spectrum and stuff like
that.
I'm
a lesbian.
You opened up about having depression and anxiety.
Yeah, Texas is not.
You're everything that is the exact opposite of what Texas is. So I can understand where you're like, I got to get out of this state, especially growing up at a young age.
Yeah, absolutely. Like 100. Yeah, like I feel like lately, Texas wasn't. Like, the book banning is a new thing in working in publishing. That's something we talk about a lot. And Texas is, unfortunately, on the forefront of that. But, you know, that wasn't happening when I was 11. But one thing that was happening when I was 11 is, like, there was, like, the area I grew up in, it's less homophobic now than it was. Like, my mom works with high schoolers, and she has, like, out kids in her class who are, like, fine. And they're doing good. Most of them do end up leaving Texas, though, because of the laws. But, like, when I was a kid, like, my hometown was significantly more homophobic than it is now. And it's like, I feel like when you're a queer kid, even if you don't admit to yourself that you're a queer kid until you're like not a kid anymore, you still kind of internalize that. So yeah, like from a young age, I was like, the vibes are off here. And then also on a very kind of much more dark and serious note, like at the beginning of the summer, there was a shooting within like a 20-minute drive of my parents' house at an outlet mall.
No,
yeah, like at an outlet mall that like my mom had students who were working there when this happened. Thankfully, they were all okay. But like this outlet mall is also like, that's where like I bought shoes as a kid growing up. Like that's like, that is right there. So that's, you know, part of why I'm like, hey, family, I think you should live not 20 minutes from where this is happening.
I mean, and I grew up in Baltimore, and I grew up in a very violent city with a lot of crime.
My mom was born near Baltimore.
I have different desensitizations to shootings and stuff like that because there were shootings all the time.
Mom,
I have friends who have died in shooting
awful.
things. I've had multiple guns pulled on me by many people, including the police, multiple times.
My mom was...
And so I have a different mindset. Like, I tell this story about living here in Boston, where it's like going to Roxbury Crossing, where they're like, oh, don't go to Roxbury Crossing. It's a dangerous neighborhood. And I'm like, why? Because that's where black people live. Like, why is that dangerous? And I'm coming off of the Orange Line train one day, and a guy rushes up on me with a gun and goes, give me all your guns. I was like, I don't have time for this. And I pushed past him and walked across the street and stood at the bus stop and waited for my bus as this guy who was about to rob me is standing there going, I have the gun. He would...
Good to know that if anyone ever like tried to rob me, that strategy would work. Because
I would not tell anyone else to do that strategy. I'm insane and stupid.
I've never been robbed. One of my friends I went to college with was mugged somewhere in Richmond at one point. But that's like the closest I think I've ever been to that situation. Although I feel like I'd say your opinion on Baltimore. My mom was actually born. I think she like grew up in Maryland. I think she was born like in Laurel. And then she moved to Texas when she was a kid.
Laurel is more like the suburbs of DC, Maryland section of the DC suburbs.
Okay, In
fact, I was just talking to people with from Laurel the other day on my tour. I'm like, oh, yay, Marylanders, go Terps. Yeah.
She was like outside DC. I don't know if they actually lived there though. That's just like the look. I don't know. I'm like, I think they like, I don't know if they lived in Laurel the whole time. This was, I was not born, obviously. But yeah, my mom moved from Buff.
All right, we're getting your mom on the podcast. We're going to have her tell her life story, then we'll get back to yours.
Yeah, she will. She knows where she lived. But anyway, she lived in Maryland as a kid, and she actually refused to let me apply to Maryland Institute of, like, MICA, like Maryland's big art school.
Oh, the Maryland Institute of College Arts?
Yeah, she wouldn't let me apply to MICA.
Oh, you missed out.
Yeah,
I'm going to be a hometown homer in here. It's like, it's a great art school.
It is.
It's in a section of the city where you're going to learn city living. But it's also, there's like, I grew up around MICA kids, like in the art, in the entertainment industry, bands, music. Man, it's a lively
Like, it's a
area
good school.
to grow up as a college kid. But it's also very bad as also at the same time. So, like, there's a stigma for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't. Yeah, like, it's a good art school. She just was like, she was like, Ellie, I'm letting you apply to, like, every other school you want. I just don't want you to live in Baltimore. Like, don't do it. And I was like, okay. Like, there are a lot of, I didn't have an attachment to Baltimore. I was like, there are a lot of, like, I grew up in Texas. I'd been to Baltimore, like, one time in my entire life at this point. I'd never been to Virginia, and I was applying to a college there. So I was like, well, yeah, there are a lot of colleges to apply to. So, like, sure, I guess.
So let's talk about, because you've created a lot of webcomics and short strips and stuff like that. What was the learning curve over the years of these different comic strips to little graphic, not novels, but
little comic books.
Instagram, like you had an ongoing Instagram comic strip and you had comic strips in your college paper. Mm-hmm. What did you learn progressing through all these different variations of comic strips? Like you went from college to producing your own. What was the key thing that you learned most creating comic strips?
Oh, man. Like what I learned from just the whole experience of making comics? Oh, that's a hard question. The first thing is, what anyone who makes comics will tell you is that it's so hard to make comics you have to draw all the things. It takes a long time. Like, I always joke with other people who make comics or other people, really honestly, other people who do any form of freelance art. Like, this is so hard. Like, dude, why, like, what's wrong with us? Like, why do we do this? So, you know, that's one thing. But then also, it's like, the reason why we do this is because it is ultimately like a really cool, rewarding process. And it's a really cool media. And I feel like the more time you spend making comics, the more you you are able to utilize the fact that comics can, like, you can do things with comics that you can't do with any other medium. Like, the way comics work with, like, physical 2D space and time is, like, it's really unique to that art form. Like, nothing else is quite exactly like it. So, you know, like, you can speed up or slow down, like, how your viewer experiences action on a page, depending how you pace your panels, how you set them up. Like, there are a lot of cool things. There are, like, a lot of cool things you can do with that. So I feel like learning more about that's like a very, like, comic nerd answer, but I feel like learning more about that for me has been a major thing. And, like, that's also very much, like, how me making comics interacts with my day job. Because, like, as I'm saying this, I think, like, of course, I'm, like, super into, like, page layouts of comics because that's, like, what I do all day at work.
Oh, man, I am, as someone who does writing and stuff, like, some, you know, I am so obsessed with type font and index spacing of script ledger and, like, script formatting. I could talk for hours on that stuff because it's like the indents of this and how many line space, you know, because I get bogged down with the minutia of all of that. But it's like, I'm trying to, like, attributing, like, creating comic strips for you, because learning to build a story and build momentum and figure out the key points. Like, what drawing do I have to make to sell this explanation of the story?
Yeah.
Like, that has got to be a hard thing to learn, similar to the way that, like, I can talk to you about the film industry, and that is, they tell you go out and make films, make short films, make films without dialogue, make this. And that teaches you how to create feature films. Yeah. You know, you're about to release a full length comic, which congratulations on Red and Blue winning a Mice Award or a Mice grant.
Yeah, won one of the mini grants from Mice Indie Comic Expo. Or Massachusetts Indie Comic Expo.
Yeah, which was just the other week. So that's brand new information. Congratulations.
Thank you so much
on it. So what was the process of creating? Let's skip ahead a little bit.
Okay.
And talk about the process of creating a comic strip or creating, what is it, Red and Blue? It's going to be a comic book?
It is. It does already exist. I have copies of it here because I have all my, like, table stuff for when I, like, table at art events, like, just next to my desk. That's where it is. I am not tabling. But yeah, at Mice was when it, like, debuted. So it is here. It is existing. I'm selling it at events around Boston that I table at. But yeah, I have a copy of it here. It's called Blue and Red, but people always mix up the name because on the cover I have the word blue and red and the word red and blue, which is intentional because it is about gaslighting. I thought I was so...
Which, I mean, like, and that's, by the way, hats off to you. You've already talked about being open about depression and anxiety. Like, mental health is a huge proponent. I'll get to that. Finish talking about your book. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, sure. So it's...
So what was the process of getting this book published? Like, where was the funding? Where was the grant? Like, trying to learn to write this book from a personal opinion. What was the steps in life that brought you up to this?
I mean... So I know a lot of times when people are self-publishing a comic book, they do Kickstarters or something like that. I did not do that. I was like, I will just print a limited number of these and not bother with this. And that is what I did. I printed 75 copies, probably at the end of this year. I'll get more printed because, you know, I didn't expect to win a thing that made more people want to buy the comic from me. So...
I didn't expect to do something that was successful.
Yeah.
Stupid me.
I was like, I never done Mice before. And it was like, I'd done a smaller Richmond Indie Comic Expo thing, which is something my college puts on. I've done that before. But Mice is like, there are like actual celebrities there, like famous celebrities. So it's intimidating, you know?
Oh, trust me, I've worked around celebrities my whole life, and I had to keep that internal.
Yeah.
Because of I'm a professional in this business, and I have to be around other professionals. But inside, you're like, fangirling.
That totally also happens to me at like my day job as well, because that's children's publishing. And if you are a nerd about publishing like me, then there are people who you'll like bump into. Like Charles Bridge publishes books by Grace Lynn. I've never met Grace Lynn, but the fact that I am tangential to her is still wild. But if you know things about children's publishing, then like you know who Grace Lynn is, and you know that she's very important. But yeah, like I feel that. But yes, so I was like, I'm applying to this event. There are actual celebrity people who are going to be there. Like Jillian Tamaki was signing there. And the fact that people were buying comics from her in the same space they were buying comics from me, like that level of closeness is already like, that's a lot. So anyway, yeah, I didn't assume that I was going to win the mini grant. I also I know someone who is a full-time freelance artist who did mice last year, and she was on the wait list, and she got taken off the wait list at the last minute, and she sold at mice, and she did super well, and she's really talented. So I was like, I've never done this event before. I'm just going to focus on getting in. So the process of making this was, I was kind of like, I've been like vending at events around Boston. I really love making comics. I should like make, and also I sell comics when I table at different like art markets around the city. And I'm like, I should make a new comic for a bunch of reasons. One is that I have comics on my table that I sell when I table at these art markets, and they're all from when I was in college. And two, the webcomic is wrapping up. So, that's going to be done. And like, that was a big part of my week. Every week was finishing a comic strip. So I'm like, I have time. I need something else to work on. And then kind of the idea of making a comic about the abusive relationship I was in college had been bouncing around in my head for a while. Like at one point I tried to sketch it, and then I was like, and then I was like, and then I just kind of stopped and didn't go further with it. And so I was like, okay, so like I know what comic I want to make. I'm going to finally make that comic. And then it was about writing the script, which I did, and basically I did it in a couple days. I based it. I don't usually base scripts for comics off of any form of prose, but for this, I wanted to make sure it was accurate to what was happening at the time, and this was a few years ago, so I based it off of a piece of personal writing I did, like, very shortly after I kind of got out of this, like, emotionally abusive situation. And then I, like, had to sketch out all the pages, like, make thumbnails of what they were going to look like, and put words in that and make it into a PDF to, like, send to mice before the application deadline, because they want to see what new material you'll be debuting when they decide who to accept. And I did that all really fast. Then I was like, hopefully I get accepted to mice, because I worked really hard on this, and otherwise I will be sad. And then, luckily, they did accept me, which was very good. And so, basically, the acceptances went out at the beginning of the summer, and I knew that, mice is the beginning of October. So, basically, I took this comic, which is, like, 48 pages, from sketches to, like, a final PDF I could send to a printer and pay for them to print over the course of a summer, which I would not recommend doing. But yeah, but I'm really, really happy with what I made.
So here's the thing about, like, mental health is a very important subject to me. I have a lot of material in my comedy about mental health. I literally, as merchandise, sell a coffee cup that says, not until I've had my coffee, and coffee is scratched out, and it says antidepressants.
That's really funny. I like that very much.
Because I thought about that. Somebody was talking about I hate coffee.
Oh, I like coffee.
But I remember somebody talking about coffee cups, and I was like, you know what? That should be a thing. And I looked for it, and nobody made it. So I started making it.
Good for you. That's awesome.
And yeah. And the joke about, like, I talk about my whole mental health. I talk about the coffee cup. And then I tell people that 100% of the proceeds of the sales of this coffee cup, available at deadairdennis.com, is goes 100% of the proceeds go directly to my copay for Zoloft.
Nice. That's so funny.
Yeah. It's the best way to tell your coworkers you live with a mental illness. And I try to take the stigma out of it. Like that's what I talk about in comics. And so in my as a stand-up. So for you to open up a comic book and write an entire comic book about dealing with depression, dealing with anxiety, dealing with an abusive relationship, I can't imagine was an easy subject for you to get into. For me, sometimes I have to take time to detach myself from something, from an incident before I can start talking about it. Oh my God,
absolutely.
Like one of my biggest bits is that losing my job in radio. I was with a company for 15 years.
Oh God,
and then my entire career ended. And it took me almost an entire year. It took me 10 months, more, 10 and a half months maybe, to start talking about that incident and making jokes about it.
Oh, yeah. Like, I definitely.
And that's like nowhere near on the level of being in a gaslighting, abusive relationship with somebody who lives with anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
So, what was the process of you learning how to heal? Were you able to use this comic book as part of healing? Or are you like me, where you had to learn to heal yourself before you could start opening up about the wounds that were created by the incident that you had to unfortunately live through?
It was like kind of that's a good question. It was definitely like a mix of those two things. I didn't really talk to anybody about it in depth anyway, for a while, for like, probably at least a year. The people closest to me, like, they knew kind of what happened. They were like, oh, Ellie and this one of our like loose friend group aren't really talking to each other anymore because, you know, there was like an emotionally abusive situation or whatever. But in terms of getting into the details, like, I definitely needed some distance. And then making the comic definitely helped a lot. Like, I feel like since I've made it, I can talk about it without like re-experiencing all the emotions. Like, I feel like kind of once I wrote the comic, this sounds cheesy, but it was kind of like once I wrote the comic strip, it was all out of me. And now it's like people might read this comic and it might, you know, and they might be like, oh, that's sad. And I'm like, well, you have to deal with that now. That's not my problem anymore. So
I mean, there's sometimes where I talk about sad things on stage and people come up after me and they're like, do you want to, like, I'm going to be very flippant about a very uncomfortable subject. One of my favorite bits was talking about how I had to go back to Baltimore to bury my best friend from high school after he committed suicide.
That's really tough.
And I mean, it is a dark, hilarious set. And I've had my friends or my other comedians come up to me afterwards like, hey man, I'm really sorry to hear about your friend. I was like, oh, that shit happened like 5 years ago, bro. Like, I'm past it. Like, like it's over. Like, I get it. Like, I make the joke as if I just got back from Baltimore, but it's also the whole thing is, you know, I get that where you're like, hey, I've already emotionally dealt with this. If you're having any problems with it, that's on you, not me.
I'm really similar where like, I'm not going to I'm not going to make art about something that I am sharing with any sort of wider audience unless it's something that I'm really comfortable talking about with anybody. And I'm not going to like get to that place with hard things until it's kind of been a while, and just talking about it won't like trigger anything, you know? So on one hand, I was at that place before I made the comic, and then after I wrote the script, it was like, all right, like everything that I talked about kind of specifically in this script, like I've written it, I've processed it, and then working on the comic just became like working on the comic, like making the artistic decisions, like conveying the emotions well, trying to do interesting things with the medium, all of like, you know, trying to get drawing myself at different ages correctly. Like I made a photo of reference folders of like me throughout college. So, you know, it kind of became about that and less about the trauma, which I think is good. Like, I think if every time I worked on it over the summer, I was like re-experiencing trauma, that would have like been really deeply unhealthy. But I will say, like, like, you know, I am still traumatized. There's still definitely effects from that. I know when I told my therapist I was working on a comic about it, he was super happy. He was like, yay, you're processing. But
Wait, has the therapist read the comic book yet?
oh my God, I don't think he's actually read it. I should I'm like, I haven't seen him in person since I got like physical copies of the comic book because I've been so busy. A lot of it is because I'm doing like an art market like most weekends. You know, of the past month, I've been doing an art market like most weekends. And I used to see him on the weekend in person, but I'm like, this is just a really busy time of year. So
Well, yeah. I mean, it makes, I don't know if it makes sense or not because, you know, when I'm in between therapists, but when I'm seeing therapists, my comedy comes up and they ask, and I have to recreate jokes or incidents. And like, I don't know if I would want my therapist to come see me do jokes. And when I talk about jokes, I don't do the jokes. I talk about the jokes in reference form, and I'll do little quotes, but I don't do the whole bits the way they are. And it's for me as a comedian, when I'm talking about these things, there's definitely that was like, well, maybe you should sit in the back of the room and watch me how to do this, and then I don't have to recreate this.
Yeah, for sure. I think he like when I first I've shown him bits of the process of the comic. Probably next time I see my therapist in person when I'm able to, because we're doing like sessions right after, like, because, you know, I work 9 to 5 at a publishing company. Like our new thing is doing sessions like right at 5 on Zoom. Like I'm now one of his remote clients for the foreseeable future, at least through the holidays. But anyway, so next time I meet with him, I will like hold it up and be like, look, here it is. But yeah, when I was working on it throughout the summer,
send them the PDF.
Oh yeah, I could do that. Yeah, when I was working on the comic throughout the summer, though, I was more available during the day on the weekend to meet with my therapist in person, which is what I prefer doing. And so he he 100% skimmed the script. And then at one point when I was working on the comic, like I showed him some of the pages, his general thoughts were that he was very happy that I was doing it because getting over that trauma was one major thing that he was working on with me. Like that was like one thing he had me do is like write down like a timeline of that entire relationship and send it to him, which I think was partially for me, but also partially just because there were like so many different types of bad things that happened all at different times. And he like needed it as a reference. I'm not sure though. I did not ask him why.
I'm sorry to laugh, but
it's funny.
I'm not laughing at a situation. I'm thinking about the scenario where like he needs paperwork and diagrams to be able to sort through
I don't know. It's also
that's just hysterical. It's right. Like we need paperwork. We need to file this stuff away.
Right? Like it's like I don't know if that's actually why he was like, can you like write out a full timeline of this and send it to me? Like, I do not know if that is why, but I like want to think that's why because it's like the funniest possible explanation, you know? But yeah, so he hasn't seen the totally finished comic. His therapist is very, very glad that I did it. I do still have trauma around that. A lot of it is getting into romantic relationships after being in an emotionally abusive situation, which unfortunately, I'm not the only person I know who's going through something like that. Like, I think it's a much more common problem than people who haven't been in a situation like that realize. Because, it messes with your ability to trust, and it also, like how trauma works. Like, it gives you like fear response instincts that will come up in situations where like that's not necessary.
Oh yeah, no, your brain that was designed to protect you in your entire life has now reprogrammed itself to interpret different things as threats now. So it's now overcompensate. It's like a smoke detector. We make smoke detectors extra sensitive because it has to be important that they go off when they need to instead of making it less sensitive to where it should only go off when it's supposed to. But we need it to be more sensitive. Your brain does the same exact thing where it reprograms itself to be like, hey, we got fooled and hurt this one time. Well, now we got to be super sensitive so we don't ever get fooled and hurt again. Like how our brains see faces in inanimate objects. That is a natural reaction to our brains protecting us. Was like, hey, look for the faces of things because that face may be the face of a tiger.
Yeah.
And even though we don't have to worry about that anymore, we still have that natural instinct of looking up for danger by creating faces in objects where they don't actually belong.
Yeah, that was a really great way of putting it. Like, yeah, for example, now it's like, if a significant other is like having, just like had a bad day and they're tired. And so they're just like, they're just like a little quieter and like clearly a little down on themselves. My reaction is something I've noticed is my reaction is to like tense up and like feel fear, because in the emotionally abusive relationship I was in, like if, when the person I was dating then had a bad day, like it probably meant they were going to yell at me for no reason,
Yeah.
Versus.
And then you have to be on the defense.
Yeah, exactly.
Even in new relationships. You're people with abandonment issues are always waiting for that person to abandon them, no matter what, this, that, whatever. I just had a very short relationship with a woman that clearly had issues like that, and I hope she gets her help, and we're not together. We were only together a short period of time. But I can clearly, as someone who's been through therapy, and trust me, I'm not done with therapy, but I've been through a lot of it, and I've looked through it, and I can also spot some of those things where abandonment issues, where you're pushing people away, or that you're dealing with some kind of unresolved trauma, and I have to be the bearer of it. Like, I would say things there's like, hey, I think you're, we're intimate, and I tell her she's beautiful. Like, why would you say that? I'm like, because it's true. It's like, no, it's not. And it's like, all right, well, you got problems.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a whole nother story. Another can of worms that will make your I swear to God, after this, if your next comic is not called Can of Worms, all our conversation was put.
No, I mean, unfortunately, bad news. I have an idea for the next, I have an idea for the next, long,
you got some stuff in the pipe, in the pipe. What's coming? What's in the pipe? What's in the works? What's the future of Ellie Erhart?
Okay, well, I have an idea for another comic that I think would make a lot of sense to self-publish as a little mini comic like this. This one, I think I mentioned, this is like 48 pages. So something similar, or maybe a little longer, that makes a lot, that is perfect to like I did with this one, totally indie, just like pay a printer to print it myself and then take it with me to markets and sell it there. I have an idea for that. I'm not going to say too much about it because I have not started it yet, but it's another memoir, and it would also be about mental health, and it would cover a longer period of time, and it would start from when I was a kid, right? And then another idea I have is the one major goal in my career right now, other than just continuing to do what I am doing and to do it better in a higher level, that meaning working in publishing as a book designer full-time, and then in freelance wise selling at local art markets and all that, and making comics that I print myself, is I would really like to traditionally publish a graphic novel with a trade publishing company.
Awesome.
Which is, thank you. It's also a very, very tricky process. I had an idea I was querying, and I had multiple agents who asked me for additional material, they were interested, but they ultimately all ended up deciding that it wasn't the right fit. But the fact that I had multiple agents who asked me for additional material made me be like, okay, well, I mean, I feel like I have a chance at this.
It shows that you're on the right path.
Exactly. So I kind of, sort of at the beginning of this summer, when I started working on Blue and Red, I was at this point, the graphic novel pitch that I'm sending out to agents has been, I've been sending out this same pitch for on and off for about a year. I feel like I have grown as an artist since then. So I'm going to focus on making Blue and Red for now. And at the end of the summer, I'll kind of look at it again, and I'll decide if I want to keep querying it, or if I want to make a new, better pitch and start from scratch. And I finished Blue and Red, and I feel over the course of Blue and Red, I think that personally, I think this is one of the best things that I've ever made. I'm super happy with how it turns out. I feel in the process of making it, I grew a lot as an artist and as a cartoonist. So, once I was done with it, I was kind of the current pitch package, because that's how, with graphic novels, you don't send a manuscript, you send a pitch, right? So the current pitch the current pitch packet I have going out to agents, I'm this is not the best pitch that I could make right now. So then I also have a new idea for a fictional graphic novel that I need to start writing the script for, because I'm going to write the script. I'm going to do some thumbnails for a chapter or two of the book, because that's what you do. I'm going to do some sample pages. I'm going to start sending that out to agents, and hopefully this time one of them will be like, yes, this is the right fit for me. Like, I could sell this to publishers,
Well, you got determination, you got talent, and you have what you sound like a network of people who believe in you, and they're just finding the right one to get behind. So I'm honestly super happy that we met. You keep talking about the indie shows, and that's literally, we met at a flea market.
Yeah, hassle-free.
Because I walked by, I was like, hey, will you drog my dog? Which, of course, the listeners know my dog sister very well as you do, who's been in the room the whole time up until this moment now that I'm about to introduce her. Sister, come here, girl. Come here and say hi to Ellie.
Sister. Oh my God, hi.
There she is.
Cute. I love her so much.
She is the cutest. She was. And of course, you were talking about mice. And honestly, the reason why I was at mice, I just saw a poster and I was like, oh, that's today. And we were walking around doing our little errands. And I'm like, I'm going to go over there and we're going to see the comic thing. I was no plans. It was spur of the moment. It was a whim. And I'm glad we did, because when I saw you again, I saw you doing it, I'm like, you know what? I want to talk more to you, and I want to know more your story. And I'm so glad that we got to have this moment and we made this conversation happen. And I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
And I can't wait to see Sister show up in the background of one of your other future comic books. Now, I'm not just saying that you should do that. I'm just planting a seed of maybe there'll be a dog.
She's a very good dog.
She'll do an Alfred Hitchcock-like cameo where she's just walking in the background of two characters who are talking.
She is a very good dog. She is, I think, still.
I am so lucky.
I think, still.
I am so lucky.
She's the only dog I've gotten to draw just live. Although there have been humans where I've taken a picture of the humans in that moment and then drawn from it. But I think the only person or animal I've ever drawn who actually sat for me at a market. I'm actually doing the Hassle Flea that's coming up next weekend too.
Well, I will be in Texas, so you have fun at the Hassle Flea Market. For those who are in the New England area, and if you hear this before the 21st and 22nd, which it's not going to be out, it will not be out by that weekend.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, I don't know.
I can tell you that now. I'm not going to have it done by then,
totally
but
fun.
It'll be out soon.
I do a lot of...
And you know what? Boston Hassle does a lot of really good newspaper work. They're a free newspaper. They do the flea markets. They're an online newspaper. I keep saying newspaper because I'm old. But you should definitely check them out. If you're in the New England area, they do a cool flea market, and they have some good journalistic stuff that they're doing. I've met the people that run it. And they definitely pegged me as cis white male, and I was the enemy, and then warmed them over by the end of the 4th of July barbecue we were all attending with mutual friends at. Which, trust me, I get it. I'm used to it. I look like everyone's current problem. I understand what I look like. So it's understandable.
I was actually surprised when you were like, oh, I have a podcast. I was like, oh, he's also an art person. That's so cool.
Yeah. So it was great having you. Tell everybody where they can find your comics, where they can find your artwork, where they can find everything about you yourself.
Thank you so much. Okay. So I have a website that is ellieerhart.com. I'm assuming my name will be written out in the description of the podcast. My last name is not...
Sure, I'll do that. Why not?
My last name is not spelled like Amelia Earhart's last name. It is pronounced the same, but it's different. And that's very confusing for everyone in the world. So, yeah, my website is ellieerhart.com. I have a tab there.
Erhart. Yes.
Ellie is Ellie. Erhart is Erhart. Amelia Earhart has 2 A's in her last name. I only have 1. Yeah, so... That is my website. There is a button you can click that says comics, and that will take you to the comics page. Right now I don't have a lot posted about Blue and Red. I'm going to put up some sample pages eventually. It will, if you do not live in New England, which is where I go to many art markets and sell my stuff, and so I will be selling copies of my work there. If you don't live in New England, so you can't go to these art markets, part of winning the mini grant is you get a distribution deal through Radiator Comics, so you can buy copies online with them.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, that will be available at one point soon, I think, if it is not already. And then also on my website, I have a link to my Instagram, which is Erhart Scribbles, like my last name in the word Scribbles. And that's where I post like the art markets I'll be at, update on the comics and stuff that I'm making. Once I go to Radiator Comics and I'm like, yes, they are indeed, they have my thing, you can buy it. I will post about it there also.
Excellent. Well, it was great talking to you. It was good learning your origin story, as we say in
Yes.
comic books. It was so great having you on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
And honestly, let's thank Mice for allowing you to have a table
Yeah.
and allowing me and Sister, by the way, to walk just right in, which apparently you needed to make reservations
It's
or
a free
something.
event.
I have no idea. Like it was but there was like people rushing and I just walked past them and everyone was like, why is he here? What's going on? Why is he not wearing a mask? I'm like, oh, is this still a mask event?
It was a mask event, yeah.
No.
Or at least masks were preferred. Honestly, that week, turns out when you win a thing, like a big part of the grant isn't just the grant. The grant is like $100. So they're sort of refunding you the cost of your table or paying for part of your printing.
That's great.
Yeah, which is great. It's amazing. And then one other, like a big part of the grant isn't just that though. It's that like they heavily publicize your work and they like mark in the map where, these new mini comics that won this year are going to be. So, when you win that, a lot of people want to buy your comic. So that weekend was a blur. There were many people. I do not know how many were wearing masks. A lot of them were. I don't know if all of them were. I was.
There was a point where I was like noticing that I was the only one who wasn't. I was like, uh-oh.
Okay, that's good. Because there is also like comics attracts a lot of people who are like in marginalized groups. So I feel like there is a higher than average number of like chronically ill people in comics.
No. I mean, I'm not anti-mask at all. I'm just also like...
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a mask on, some days you forget your mask, you look in your pocket, and you think, I bet I have a mask, and you don't, and it happens, Especially if you go somewhere on a whim.
All right, well, it was great talking to you, and I wish you continuous success, and I can't wait to hear about the next comic book.
Yeah, thank you so much. You'll let me know when this episode, comes out and such, right?
Oh,
okay.
Yes, of course. I'll do all that. We'll do all the social media tagging and all that stuff.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. The first time I've ever been on a podcast, so I'm like, oh, that's very cool.
Yes, I'm bringing you to the world of podcasting. It's not going to be the last. I'm telling you right now.
Really? Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate your faith in me because I feel like as both a designer and a cartoonist, I'm still very much early career. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, it was great talking to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
in the time.